I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Lochner, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We're excited to be a partner with Extension to bring you research-backed resources, tools, and tips to keep Wisconsin marshes productive and profitable.
And so we will have just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session. It can be available for those who were not able to attend today but want to keep up with the information that's being presented. There should be closed captions live already. If those are not showing up for you and you want them, click the little ... more. In general, we are watching the chat for questions. So if you have a question, I know I'm happy for you to unmute yourself and interrupt me and ask a question. You can also type in the chat. The little drop-down box can be to everyone or to Allison. So if you want to ask a anonymous question, use that little drop-down box to set it to Allison. Other than that, welcome to our fuel considerations Cranberry virtual brown bag for November 17th, the day before opening day. We are going to respond to some direct grower requests for how do we keep our fuel in the best quality when we're saving that across several years. Rick Grimm is with Inside FS, and he's the Central Area Energy Manager. He's going to give us about a half hour this morning, and I believe feel free to ask questions as we go. And then to wrap up the hour, I will give a recap of what we came up with as priorities from the Research Round Table on Wednesday, just so that people who weren't able to attend that are able to catch up and keep abreast of our research priorities. I'm going to go ahead and transition back to my PowerPoint, and we will go over some of the results from the Research Roundtable that we had on Wednesday. So if there are any questions, whether you've got follow-up questions for Rick or questions for me as we go through the Research Roundtable information, don't be shy, unmute yourself and ask. So as a general overview, with the Research Roundtable, we tend to, after harvest and after people have dried out and remembered which way is up, caught their breath again, we like to get growers together to talk with the researchers to help our researchers understand what the biggest grower needs are, find out which of those needs are university research shaped, and then help our researchers kind of go through their grant process armed with the information of what growers really care about and what growers are going to focus on and help going to help make operations better. So we have kind of the morning session where we discuss all the current research that's ongoing. In the afternoon, we broke out into 5 discussion groups to talk about each of our kind of more major groups of research. So I'm going to just go over quickly some of the results that came up both from kind of grower surveys as well as from these small group discussions. And really the discussions are the best way for researchers to understand. So if you're able to make that session next year, you're very welcome to. But we did want to at least catch folks up. If there's something that is a major issue to you that you don't see represented, feel free to ping me, send me an email or a text or anything, and I will pass that up to the researchers as well. So we kind of focused in the genetics realm on what are people's priorities for scaling up and release. We heard a lot in terms of timing of color. Some folks want early, some folks want late. We had discussions about canopy structure, not too excessive runnering, or the opposite, canopy structure to block out weeds. A lot of focus on fruit that'll meet processing requirements and hardy, comes out of dormancy easily, insect resistance, disease resistance, keeping quality, and then looking also to drought tolerance since we had a rather drouthy year this year. Also questions on even color from top to bottom in the canopy, and that kind of lines up with canopy structure. Over the course of those discussions, hearing kind of the desire for a September 23rd variety between our early varieties and our late varieties, selecting for both yield and quality. Juan has a focus on herbicide tolerance. They are also working a partnership with Juan, and I should be more formal here, with Dr. Zalapa at the USDA ARS down in Madison, partnered with Matt Digman, who is a professor of agricultural engineering, and they're looking at kind of a cart-based machine vision yield monitoring. There's been a lot of false starts on yield monitoring in cranberry, but at least for the purposes of the kind of small-scale genetics yield monitoring, they're taking a look at that. Looking at when to renovate from, if you have cultivar contamination, kind of what are tipping points for that. A lot of people focusing on cold hardiness and nitrogen utilization, as well as resistance to false blossom, those mid-season and late-season cultivars. And if I've got any questions, feel free to, when I'm the one speaking, I have to go back and look at the chat. So if you've got questions, let me know. We had several discussions in horticulture on the nutrition front, looking at our plant nutrition priorities. We look at N a lot. There's not really been a lot published on phosphorus and potassium since Terrell Roper. So then the question of should we do fresh work there? Other folks questioned whether that was actually limiting our yield, and if it's not limiting our yield, we should continue to look in other places. So the timing of nitrogen fertilizer has come up a lot. The nitrogen optimization pilot program that DATCAP is funding, grants that are going to be farmer-led, is letting people do, farmer comes up with idea, farmer asks for a little bit of guidance in shaping the trial protocol from UW, and then the farmer gets the payment from DATCAP for doing that research work. We had one cranberry grower do a nitrogen optimization pilot program project this year, focusing on what happens if we do our same planned dose of nitrogen, but starting the first week sooner than we normally would have, a little sooner than we normally would have, right when we normally would have, and later than we normally would have, and checking the results of that on yield, both in first and second year after the applications. We've learned a lot from doing that, and we're looking forward to working with more people in the coming years. If you've got an idea of, I would like to do some research and find out how I can be using nitrogen more efficiently, and you want DATCAP to kind of foot some of the bill for the extra work that you put into thinking that up and the extra samples that you'll be taking, DATCAP is offering that. So let me know. I believe the next, we have to have a project idea together by December 15th, and then a final submittal at the beginning of the year. So people had a lot of questions about monitoring nutrients during the growing season. What can we do in season? There are some projects that are doing continuous monitoring in grapes, and that's something that we get kind of the benefit of our researchers working in several different fruit crops are seeing, hey, we're doing in-season plant monitoring. Could we work on that in cranberries too? We also talked a lot about flooding. Flooding in the spring, flooding in the fall, flooding in the winter. How are we damaging our vines by reducing their oxygen? Are we protecting them by saving them from cold? Kind of those three different seasons and the different physiological state that the plant is going through. So what's happening at those times? I had a question on what is NOPP. So I will back up one quick slide and say that is the Nitrogen Optimization Pilot Program. Yeah, thank you, Fawn. From the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. It's up to $50,000 per farmer that DATCAP will award for research on helping use nitrogen better. And last year there were nearly a dozen row crop program trials run, as well as one cranberry. And we want to continue to include, make sure that we get our learning as they're wanting to fund that grower-led research. How to make the best ice? We had a lot of dissolved oxygen questions. How do we get good dissolved oxygen in our ice? Should we be monitoring, and how and where should we be monitoring? Monitoring the plant in addition to monitoring the water itself. And then also questions, as we've had a very warm fall this fall, monitoring whether to irrigate for moisture needs. If you are not diving into dormancy right after harvest, what do we need to do to maintain those plants into the season when we're finally able to put ice on them? So all of those questions on flooding and oxygen. Cold hardiness is perennially interesting. So studying deacclimation by variety and using those phenocams that Joshna is developing. Protecting for spring frosts. Also questions just on spring stressors in general, what's causing stresses and how much can plants tolerate. They are currently working on a model kind of supporting prediction for bud break phenology, and that is supporting Juan's genetics selection work, as well as will be applicable to growers. And then wondering, we kind of have growers who get caught every year about those dew point frosts. Are plants more sensitive than we thought? Are they deacclimating differently than we thought? If growers are cycling irrigation, that could be pretty dangerous in those dew point scenarios, but we need to understand more so that we can protect ourselves from those situations. And then, yeah, that was the end of the horticulture batch. Moving into entomology, a lot of talk about flea beetle. In the survey results, we had, at least 7 times as much flea beetle question as any other insects. So flea beetle control methods, whether that is the nematodes that are able to target the larval stage, and then what are the costs of applications of the nematodes, what rates are going to be effective. We're seeing nymphs of the blunt-nosed leafhoppers. I think people are feeling confident in the applications and their timings. Just need to work on implementation and scouting. The general concern is losing chemistries that we can use, the broader chemistries leading to secondary pest resurgences. So girdler and leaf miner came up more this year than I've heard in past years. Once we don't have broad spectrum insecticides, are those going to reach thresholds? So wondering, are nematodes an option on girdler, but then what's our option on leaf miners? Want to continue to focus on timing of insecticide applications for fruitworm and sparg. And then residues is always if we can find out ways to reduce residues based on our applications, maybe that'll open more things up for us. The effect of climate on pests and control options, and that's kind of if we see pests that hadn't historically been common in Wisconsin moving more into Wisconsin regions, are we going to be ready to handle those, and what control methods are we going to have? And then tipworm questions based on geography. There are folks that are in places where tipworm, you're able to have full recovery from having the tip nibbled off, but that's not always the case in other geographies. So trying to find out where those cutoffs are and helping people who are negatively impacted by tipworm have affordable control methods. Weed science, the perennial cry is long-term control for dewberry, long-term control for maples. There's been curiosity about whether St. John's wort is actually impacting yield, or is that just an aesthetic problem? So possibly some yield results on that. Lots of discussion of lasers, electricity, boom attachments for taking out some of our woody perennial weeds. We discussed Quinstar. and wishing for figuring out MRL issues, because people that have stick tites or other big problems, if people are looking at Quinstar in new plantings, but even possibly shifting some acres to domestic production just to get rid of a problem that then lets you go back and be able to be maintenance mode rather than playing on defense. Moss, and then in other areas, Virginia creeper and milkweed and some other things that we're used to thinking of as row crop weeds are starting to creep into cranberry beds. Best practices on tank mixes is more of an extension sort of a question versus a research one, but we should be able to get information there. And then the caution of buying pesticide packages being sold on incentives so that you'll use them next year whether you need them or not. So always kind of keeping aware of making sure that you're doing the integrated in your integrated pest management. Talking about pathology, this was a relatively low rot year in Wisconsin as we had a fair amount of drought stress. And so we also saw a resurgence of several of the viruses that we had been kind of told in past years, like, oh, they'll work its course and they'll go back to normal. So a lot of curiosity about understanding virus transmission, expression in the new beds, possibly the impact of drought on viruses, if that's a contributing factor, since we had a drought this year and we had a bad virus year this year. Maybe those two are interrelated. So I believe Leslie's going to do some work looking at that. We're wondering what the transmission methods are of TSV as well as blueberry shock, because pollen seems to not be the only method. If we're seeing beds that are right next to each other, one with a lot of expression and one with none. We are still having questions about biocontrols for fruit rot, and then irrigation management into August on fruit rot, and then canker and harvest practices that might contribute to canker, which is the same as stem gall. I do want to encourage people to ask questions too. I realize I'm just kind of zipping through and talking folks' ear off, and I would definitely want to encourage discussion based on your questions too. So in the general management section, using drones for spraying pesticides, is the volume sufficient? Drones to check levels in grates around the marsh. Discussions on labor, contemplating housing, whether provided housing is a benefit or a disbenefit when you're working to attract workers. On the mechanical side, looking at rake and tractor damage from harvest equipment and if there are ways that we can be harvesting more gently. Drones for weed control. We're really excited about laser weeders if we can figure out ways to do that without vine damage. Residues testing from an MRL standpoint, again, kind of got pulled in here. Robotic hedge trimmer, and then looking at NDVI and multispectral imagery to get information about what to do in beds in season. Also curiosity about mechanical pollination, and I wasn't in that group, so I wish I had been, because I'm curious what our options on that front are. That, I think, brings us to a recap of what the growers had as the major discussion points for currently unsolved needs, currently questions that we wonder that we don't have the answers to, that research might help us bring the answers to. Any other questions? Oh, interesting. Yeah, so finding the vector for tobacco streak virus, and if you are having lower levels, can I ask for clarification? Is that lower levels of spread or lower levels of expression? So are you seeing like the rate of change slowing, or are you actually seeing fewer symptoms? So finding the vector for viruses. Yep, fewer symptoms. Okay, awesome. Especially in the dry year. So I will definitely add that to my sheet and pass that on directly to Leslie as she's looking at her research program for the coming year. Other questions or other priorities, we have a little bit of extra time, and any questions for Rick as well are always welcome.